Saturation is an important concept in qualitative research, especially at the stage of data collection and analysis. What is saturation in qualitative research? Why is it that we need to understand this important concept? And thirdly, what is the general process of saturation in qualitative research? These are questions that we will briefly respond to. So first, saturation. What is it? Generally, we keep on collecting and analyzing data in qualitative research, and the approach that we adopt in qualitative research generally is inductive approach, where we go from data collection and analysis to theory building. So we keep on collecting data and we keep on analyzing qualitative data, and we keep on getting insights into the issues or our research questions. We get new ideas and we categorize our data and we find themes. And this process goes on until we get to a point where if we keep collecting data and if we keep analyzing data, we generally do not get anything substantially new. And so we can say we have got to a point of saturation. Now, we can say that we get an indication that if we conduct further interviews or we conduct further observations or we conduct document analysis, what we will get will be a kind of, you can say, reoccurring of the same themes or meaning. And so we can say that it will be a repetitive information rather than getting fresh insights into our research questions or into the phenomena that we are exploring. The idea of saturation was, you can say, popularized by Glasser and Strauss in their seminal work on the discovery of grounded theory. Now, generally, saturation is not something that happens when we, for example, conduct a fixed numbers of interviews with a fixed number of participants, or we conduct a fixed number of observations. On the other hand, it is generally about the completeness or sufficiency, or you can say the richness of data that we need to have in order to find answers to our research questions. Example in education, for example, if you are a researcher and if you are interviewing secondary school teachers about, for example, the challenges that they face in implementing formative assessment, you might get to a point where, for example, when you conduct your 12th interview and the issues that are coming up in the interview, that, for example, some of the issues that the participants identify include lack of training, time constraints, student resistance, and, for example, course load. And after this, if you conduct further interviews, what you get is nothing new or not substantially new, and nothing substantial is being added to your insights as researcher into the phenomena. That will actually means that there is a repetition of the categories or the meanings that is coming out of the data. And so that actually indicates possible saturation. Now, why is it that we need to have this concept of saturation in qualitative research? So there are several reasons. One of the reasons is that saturation actually helps us in ensuring rigor and credibility in our qualitative research. So saturation demonstrates that findings are not partial and they are not premature, and that our themes are comprehensive exploration of the questions that we ask as researchers. Secondly, the concept of saturation and the practice of saturation prevents us as researchers from over collection or collection of data that is not needed. So what happens is that it helps us in avoiding investing our time and in avoiding using resources on collecting data that is not adding anything meaningful or substantial to the understanding that we already have. Then it also helps us in supporting the trustworthiness of our study. So if, for example, it increases credibility because data represents reality, it helps us in the understanding and presenting the transferability of our research, which is actually findings that apply in similar contexts. And thirdly, it helps us in increasing the dependability of our research. All of these are important characteristics of qualitative research. Next, why is it important is that it strengthens the theory building. Theory building or building theory from our data is an important aspect of qualitative research. So saturation is something that helps us in indicating that we have a well-developed and dense conceptual framework or a theory that is important especially in grounded theory studies. So for example, again, if you are studying on principal strategies for improving school discipline, so what strategies, for example, generally principals use in improving school discipline? And you keep on collecting data from principals, and then you reach to a saturation point when you see that every strategy that is mentioned by later participants, for example, you have collected data from 10 principals in a particular district, and when you are collecting further data from the 11th and 12th and 13th principal, the new data that is coming is still identifying the strategies that echo the previous ones that are found in the earlier data till the 10th participant. And so this actually means that there is theoretical completeness, or you can say sufficiency of the data that is required for building the theory or for coming up with certain conclusions. Now, the other thing is that generally saturation should not be considered as a mechanical process or step, but it is basically a methodological judgment on the part of the researcher. So generally in qualitative researches, the researchers are the ones who decide on the sufficiency of data and the sample. So saturation is something that helps the researchers in making informed judgments related to the sufficiency or insufficiency of the data. And so there are certain strategies that we can make use of in order to make sure that we have got to the point of saturation. So first of all, we need to plan for iterative data collection and analysis. Generally, in qualitative research, we keep on collecting data, we keep on analyzing that data, and then we get insight into the issue from that data. And then if we think we need to collect more data, we keep on collecting more data. And so this is a process of iteration. So we start coding as we collect data. And so we do not code after we have done all the interviews, for example, or all the observations. We keep on coding data right from the very beginning, and we continuously do it. Then we continuously collect more data. We compare new data and the themes that come out of the new data with the existing codes. And I have several lectures in this space on the process of coding in qualitative data and in the process of data analysis. You can have a look at it. Generally, in grounded theory approach, we use constant comparative method of data analysis, where we collect data, we analyze that, we then collect more data, we analyze, and we come up with themes. We compare the previous data and codes and themes with the new data, and we keep on doing this till we reach to a saturation point where further data collection does not lead to further insights or new you can say themes. And B, we need to use sampling approaches that promote richness. Generally, in qualitative research, the samples that we use are purposive samples, and so we need to have information rich data sources. So in purposive sampling, what we do is that we select participants who can provide maximum variation in experiences, and they help us in getting rich data. And so these are important ways in which we can get to saturation. The how is also something where we think about theoretical sampling. So what is theoretical sampling? Generally, we make use of theoretical sampling in grounded theory approach, where we follow emerging themes to select new participants who can elaborate on underdeveloped categories. So we keep on collecting data, we develop themes and categories, and then there are certain themes that need further elaboration, further development, and so for that we need to collect more data. So the sample is not pre-decided, but we keep on adding to the sample till we get to the saturation point. And so this type of sampling is generally called theoretical sampling. Now, we also need to monitor the emergence of new themes. We keep on, you can say, analyzing data, but we also keep a track of the previous themes, and we compare those with the new themes. And so we can do this by keeping a saturation grid or a code book, logbook, where we can actually compare the new themes coming from the new data with the previous themes. And D, the process of triangulation, that is, sometimes you collect data from one source or in one way, for example, through interviews, and you get to a saturation point, but you need to make sure that there is a real saturation. So you can also conduct, for example, focus groups. In some cases, you might get further insights in the focus groups, but in some cases, the focus groups might not lead to any substantial insight, further insights into the issue that you are exploring. That will also indicate saturation. In some cases, you can conduct interviews and observations. And so triangulation, you can say, is also an important way of helping us in consolidating the concept of saturation in our research. Now, saturation as a concept and as a practice has certain strengths. For example, it offers a useful stopping criteria for data collection. So when should we stop? Saturation will tell you. Secondly, it enhances credibility by showing the phenomenon has been fully explored. Thirdly, generally it fits naturally with inductive iterative approaches. That is generally the case in qualitative studies, especially in grounded approaches. So these are some of its strengths, but it also has certain limitations, and those limitations include, for example, ambiguity in some cases. For example, there is no universal understanding or standard for how to measure saturation. So saturation is generally something that is decided by the researchers, and because the researchers have a variety of experiences and expertise, so that's why in some cases some researchers might reach a saturation sooner than others. That is why, because there is no universal standard for deciding when when we reach to the point of saturation. Therefore, it is there could be some ambiguity. And again, what counts as new themes, for example, can be subjective. Some people might think that there are new themes, but others might think that the new themes that are quite similar to some of the previous ones, and so they might reach to that point. So that's one of the issues with this process. Secondly, in some cases, some researchers have identified certain numbers. For example, in a more, you can say, coherent group or similar group of interviewees, some people say that from 6 to 10 or 12 interviews is something that can lead to saturations, but others might not agree with this. So if you are, for example, focusing on numbers, in some cases, some researchers pre-decide certain numbers, and so that's something that might not be a very useful idea. So we can say that some researchers might misuse the concept of saturation in order to justify some small sample sizes, and in that case they might not have adequate depth in the data. Also, in some cases, in certain research designs or conditions, the concept of saturation might not be properly applicable. For example, in exploratory or interpretive phenomenological studies, the focus is not on saturation actually, but on the depth of meaning. And so you might not need a particular number of participants to get to saturation point, but actually what you need to do is to dig deeper into the personal meanings. And so in that case, saturation might not be a good idea. And lastly, there are certain static assumptions, and those assumptions, for example, the idea that knowledge can be complete, which actually means saturation means that like it's complete, we have a very good or deeper understanding because we have reached a point of saturation. Now, this is something that is generally in conflict with the idea of postmodernism, the idea of constructivist ideas of knowledge, where meanings are always evolving and context dependent, and you can say there is no final point. So these are some of the points, some of the critical points that you need to keep in mind while you are making use of the concept of saturation in your qualitative research.